Hi, everyone. My name is Felipe. I'm an AWS Global Practice Leader here at eCore, so help working with eCore to expand the AWS strategy globally. And I'm also recognized by AWS as an AWS Community Hero. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today and talk about FinOps, which is a topic that has been so important. And I mean, costs and revenue at the end of the day, that is something that is always important to companies. I see there are a lot of people online, so ask questions. There's a tool in your screen where you can click on Q&A and ask questions, interact with me via the chat, so we can have a really good discussion around FinOps best practices and how we improve our cost and efficiencies in the cloud, right? So to start, let's exercise what's FinOps and what does it look like at the end of the day. To simplify, let's think that our company, all the infrastructure is 5 servers, right? Just an easy number for me to do some math here, but you can think of that in the context of your company. And imagine you have a meeting with your IT director and with your CFO in the morning. And the previous day, you made a change in the infrastructure that made it possible to reduce 2 of those 5 servers. So you had a 40% economy. How do you feel going into that meeting? Do you feel like confident, like that's something that you're really happy to share with your CIO, with your CFO, or do you feel nervous? So if you want, answer that in chat so we could interact a little bit. And also think of a different scenario, right? Think of a scenario where instead of reducing 2 of those 5 servers, you made a change in the infrastructure that it made it necessary to increase 4 more servers. Now, how do you feel going into that same meeting with the CFO and with the CIO? A lot of the people, when I ask this question, I see some people answer privately for me in chat. They feel good about the first scenario, like you're going to go into a meeting saying you reduce the company's costs. And sometimes they say that they feel a little bit nervous when you're going to a meeting when you had to increase in 80% the IT costs. So at the end of the day, which of these 2 scenarios is better? Well, me, Felipe, myself, I can't answer this question with just the information that we have without other data that is important. So I don't know what is the impact on the company's revenue. I only know the impact of costs, and that is something that FinOps brings to us. So the variation in cloud technology costs only matters if we can measure the business impact with this. Otherwise, we don't know if we're doing something that is reducing costs, but it has a negative impact in the business part. Werner Vogels, the CTO for Amazon, he in AWS reInvent 2023, he talked a lot about FinOps, and he brought some really important information about an article, a white paper actually, he wrote in 2012, which says that we need to find the dimension in which we will make money with the cloud, and we need to ensure that our architecture will follow that money. So he also brought some of the metrics that AWS or Amazon, actually, the e-commerce Amazon.com, uses to measure the impact of the infrastructure changes. For example, they always look for every application for the cost per request, the cost per transaction, and the conversion rate per request. So they're always measuring these metrics. And what does this look like for a company? Well, let's try to make an exercise here, and please message me in chat so we could interact and have this exercise a little bit of what FinOps means. So I put some easy numbers to make it easy. So imagine your company has a $2 million a month revenue. You spend $100,000 a month in infrastructure, and you're in e-commerce where you have a 5% conversion rate, right? So imagine that's your scenario. And then you have 3 options. You can make a change in your infrastructure, a change in your application that will have to increase in $20,000 a month, the infrastructure cost. It was an implementation that you made to reduce latency so your users have a better performance. And that will increase your conversion rate by 1% because your users are happier, you get a better index in the search tools. There's a second scenario where you reduce your cost in $20,000 per month. You made some performance changes, so you didn't need that. Some of the services you reduce cost in $20,000, but that decreased your customer's experience, and that reduced in 0.5% your conversion rate. And there's another scenario where you increase in $100,000 your spent in technology to also reduce latency, but that only brings a conversion rate increase by 0.1%. So what is the best scenario? Where if you are a manager or a CIO, you make decisions in technology in a company, which scenario, which option would you choose for your team, right? So think a little bit about that. Well, let's look at all of them, right? In the first scenario, we had a 20% improvement in our conversion rate. It was 5, now it's 6. So we're talking about 20%, and 20% of our conversion rate, if we had a $2 million a month revenue, we're talking about a $4,000 revenue increase for a $20,000 increase in spend. So we're talking about a 20 times return of investment. So that is definitely a really good thing to bring to the CIO, to the CFO. So if I'm going to the meeting saying that I'm going to increase our costs in $20,000, but I'm going to increase revenue in $400,000, that is definitely something really good. Some people are sharing messages here. So yeah, a lot of people voted in scenario 1. And someone shared that they always like to look at a simple calculation, that spend equals usage times rate. So exactly, we have to understand what is the usage and what is the rate, right? If we're having more usage with less rate, that does make a lot of sense. If we go with the second scenario where we have a $20,000 per month economy, but we reduced in 0.5% the conversion rate, at the end of the day, if we had a 5% conversion rate, now we have a 4.5, we're reducing in 10% our conversion rate. That is $200,000 a month of decrease in revenue for a $20,000 a month economy. That's not good. We have a negative 10 times return of investment, so it doesn't make sense. And finally, sometimes we are so optimized that we have to invest a lot in technology to have just a small increase in performance or even in the results. So this increase in $10,000 a month in technology would only bring 0.1% improvement in conversion rate. So we'd be going from 5 to 5.1. That's a 2% conversion rate increase. That would bring only $40,000 of revenue for an $100,000 cost. So that's a negative 2.5 return of investment. So at the end of the day, which scenario is better? We can't answer with this information. We need to understand what is the impact in the business. For that, that's a little bit of what FinOps means. That's a little bit of how we should make decisions in technology. And we need to prepare our infrastructure and our technology to give us enough information to make those decisions, and we need to test. So for every deploy, we have to measure what was that impact in my conversion rate, for example, or whichever metric is important for your business related to technology. Because I always say that decreasing cost in the cloud, that is something that is really easy to do. And I can promise, like for everyone, if you're using cloud technologies, I could reduce your cloud expenses in 5 minutes. There's a script that's called AWS Nuke, where basically you delete the account, you delete all the servers, and that will make you spend nearly zero in the cloud. But that's probably not what your business needs. So we're always going to talk a lot about cloud optimization. And when we talk about FinOps, there's a lot of information related to the FinOps maturity. So I'm going to share a link for whoever wants to talk about FinOps maturity, one second. So whoever wants to schedule a meeting so we understand how is your FinOps practice like? How can it be improved? There's a FinOps assessment that we can work with. So I shared the link in the chat. Whoever wants to respond to that, we'll schedule a meeting and look at your needs, right? And so someone said here that FinOps is a science where everyone in the company and the company's teams involved in the solution, developers, finance, tech leaders, are integrated and need to be aware of the costs related to providers and their resource. Yes, that is perfect. And I'd say there's one more part to that is not just costs. We don't talk about costs. That is something that people think a lot with FinOps. They think a lot about costs, but we need to look at revenue too. So why does FinOps exist? How did it, like a little bit about the history of this practice? So say 20, 30 years ago when we were developing things in technology, whenever we needed to deploy a new solution, we need to understand what our demand was. We need to request for the infrastructure department a few servers. Infrastructure would go to procurements to buy those servers. They would like search for suppliers. They would research prices. They would negotiate those prices. Then our procurement team would hire those servers. We need to have those servers delivered. Then IT would configure it and install those servers. Then they would make them available for the development team. Then we would start deploying our solution. So it would take a few months to have a deploy. With cloud, that is a lot easier, right? We log into our console, we understand what we need, we log into our console, we launch the server, and then we can start developing what we need. So that takes a few minutes. So what we increase in speed and agility, we lose in cost control. So that is something that has been happening over the last years with cloud technologies. A lot of people have a lot of access. Anyone could start a server and not a lot of control of how to do that and what are the needs for the company related to that. So there has been over time a lot of controlling costs, right? So why should we adopt FinOps? So with the rise of cloud usage, empowered development teams with a lot of speed, although not a lot of accountability related to the cloud spend, because everyone could start a server. And recent research show that about 69% of the companies exceed the budget for cloud in over 25%. So, I mean, as this practice evolves, not a lot of people know how to budget cloud spend. Only 25% of cloud managers have visibility of what they're consuming. So a lot of people know, like at the end of the month, what they're spending, but they don't know how they're spending that. 25% of these leaders that say that has impacted innovation. So innovation projects have been stopping because you don't know how much you're going to spend, or maybe you're spending too much elsewhere and you can't invest in innovation. And a lot of companies have stopped migration projects because of lack of control in the cloud. And what I'm saying here is not that the cloud is bad. No, cloud is really good and it gives a lot of speed to innovate, but you need to bring a new culture to how you manage costs in the cloud. And that's where FinOps came a few years ago. The FinOps Foundation, I'll send the link for whoever wants to, FinOps Foundation. So it's FinOps.org. FinOps.org has a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of resources related to FinOps, where you can learn a little bit more, understand the concepts. They have a certification that is really interesting, a little bit expensive, but is interesting related to FinOps. And they recently updated the definition of FinOps. So that was December of last year. So FinOps right now is defined as an operational framework and cultural practice which maximizes business value of the cloud, enables timely data-driven decision-making, and creates financial accountability through collaboration between engineering, finance, and business teams. So that is a little bit of what the definition of FinOps is. And I'd like to highlight some of the points, right? So it's an operational framework and a cultural practice. It really changes the culture of the company, we maximize business value. So we talk about revenue, not just cost. We talk about profitability of the company at the end of the day. Timely, like fast and data-driven decision-making, we need to understand where we should invest more, like the example that we used earlier. We should invest where we'll have a greater return. But if we don't know what the return is going to be, that's really a hard decision to make. And financial accountability through collaboration. So those are some important things I like to highlight about the definition, right? So just a quick overview. We're talking about financial accountability. We're talking about enable distributed IT, finance, and business to sync together for agility, cost, and quality. And we can allocate technology costs to business value generation for the company. Okay. And before moving forward in the presentation, let me change my screen really quick because I like to show a little bit of how I like to see that like really working. Like what does it mean to understand the revenue or visibility related to costs? Let me share this other screen here. Can everyone see my screen? Let me put you here. I think you can see my screen. There we go. So this is a demo. This is a tool that we use to look at our customer spend. This is a demo account. This data isn't real. It's I mean, it's based on real data, but we made some changes just as a demo, where we can understand a little bit more about our cloud costs. There are a lot of really good FinOps tools out there, but we think they lack a little bit of integrating with what is the business value. So basically here we have a really important metric, which is the tag coverage. If we don't tag our resources in the cloud, we won't be able to understand them. And we always work with some basic tags that I'll talk a little bit later in the presentation. Of course, we need to understand how much we're spending, but one thing that is really important is understanding how much a request or a transaction costs. So what does a transaction mean to your company? Is it a sale? Is it a user using your platform? Is it someone logging in? So for each company, you need to understand what is the success metric for that application that we should measure. And then we can look over time for the cost per application, the cost per service category. Of course, we need to understand which specific server we're spending, but it's also good to have a category, right? So if we're spending with database, with compute, with networking and all that. In environment, are we spending too much in quality assurance or development instead of spending in production, for example? And are we evolving our tag coverage over time? I mean, we need to have over 90% of tag coverage. And when we talk about understanding the impact in the business, let me just show you a few examples, right? So let me get only my production resources, right? And they're all tagged. And let me look per application. So let me look at first application 1. If we see application 1 decrease the cost over time, so it decreased our spend over time, and we can see we had a really big decrease both in compute and in database. And also the cost per request reduced over time. So this means I'm being more productive. For the same number of requests, I'd be spending less, right? But if I come here to application 2, the scenario is a little bit different. The cost per application, the cost per request has been increasing. So it's not just that I increased the spend in this month. It means that my application is less efficient because for each request, I'm spending more. And that's definitely something that we should look for because it means that we're making less money for the company. And for this third example, we can see something different over time. First, we reduced the cost per request, but that was because we weren't having a lot of requests. So we had months where this application wasn't generating value for the business, and then it increased. Even if this month we spent like 5 or 4 times more than September and October, the cost per request was a lot less. And if we only look at costs, we'd be saying that, well, February was a bad month. We spent a lot more in cloud. but if we compare the revenue that we made for the money, this is for the company, this is more efficient. So this is a little bit of what we believe we should be looking when we think about FinOps. Let's not just look just at costs. Let's also understand the impact for the company related to revenue. So going back to the presentation, there we go. Let me know if you're seeing my presentation, and please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A option, and so we could answer specific questions. If you have something specific from your company, please feel free to share, and we can discuss a little bit more about that. So now bringing some of the important concepts related to FinOps. So this is really based on the FinOps Foundation definition. So we have a few principles that guide the FinOps practice. So first, teams need to collaborate. Everyone is responsible for the cloud consumption. FinOps data must be accessible and up to date. Like, everyone should be able to understand how they're spending money. A centralized team heads FinOps. Even though everyone is responsible, there is a centralized team that will lead that. Decisions need to be based on the cloud business value, not just on cost. And we need to benefit from the cloud variable pricing model. The cloud variable pricing model should be something good and not something bad. So a little bit more details of these concepts. So first, finance and technology need to work together. We need to have continuous near real-time monitoring for better decision-making. So teams need to work together so everyone could have information related to the decisions they need to make. We need to and also develop continually through collaboration. So development teams need to have information from the other teams so they can make timely decisions. When we talk about everyone being responsible for the cloud consumption, everyone needs to be accountable for consumption. So if you're going to start a server, you need to know what that impact is going to be. And each team should manage their own cloud consumption. We need to increase awareness in our organization through presentations, through workshops and things like that. So we need to enable our teams to understand, what does FinOps mean? And also one thing that I see a lot in technology is that sometimes the technology teams, they only have cost information. They only know how much they're spending, but they don't know if that's generating revenue for the organization. So that is definitely something that companies need to change. And we need to set budgets according to business metrics. So we talk a lot about variable budgets in cloud. Maybe the cloud budget shouldn't be, for example, $1 million. It could be like 10% of the company's revenue, for example. So if the revenue increases, it's natural that the cloud cost is also going to increase. And like I said, it's not possible to maintain fixed budgets for seasonal businesses. So if you're in e-commerce, probably you'll sell more in November and December, and the cloud budgets need to go with that, right? When we say that decisions need to be made based on business values, we need to have a clear understanding of how technology generates value for the company. And that is something that sadly we don't see a lot. We talk with a lot of companies and we ask, like, why are you using cloud? And a lot of the times they'll answer that, well, just because everyone's doing it, because cloud is good, but they don't know how to measure the revenue that's bringing to the company. So that is something that a lot of people still need to work with. We need to define what are the business metrics associated with each cloud resource consumption. We need to prioritize initiatives that will increase our return of investment. Like the example that we said before, a lot of you answered, we should invest in scenario 1 because it is the scenario that will bring more revenue to the company. And we need to have cloud as an enabler to innovation. So with cloud, with knowledge and spend, we should be innovating faster. So one metric that companies use is the number of deploys or the number of new feature launches. Like we said in the principles, FinOps data needs to be accessible and up to date. So information about consumption needs to be accessible to the stakeholder. So if I'm in charge of the cost per request, I need to have that information. We need to have frequent data updates. So depending on your company, maybe you need every minute a data updating if you're a Netflix, for example. If you're a smaller company, maybe an hourly update or every 6 hours update, that could be something good, because you'll understand if there's an anomaly or maybe you're spending more than you should, you can detect that faster and act upon it faster. We need to monitor and have alerts regarding consumption. So if we expect to have a 10-cent cost per request or per transaction, if that increases in 10 or 20%, maybe that should alert us so we make a decision. Or even if we're used to spending like $10,000 a month, and we're in the 10th day of the month and we're already spending $5,000, that should alert us. We need to understand trends. We need to understand and have an agile response. So if there is a change, if we're selling more, if we're selling less, we need to understand that so we could act upon it. We need a centralized team to lead FinOps. So we need to have staff that is responsible for encouraging, educating, empowering the rest of the teams related to FinOps practices. For example, last week we delivered a FinOps workshop for 80 people for one of our customers. So of course there is a smaller IT team, but like we said, everyone is responsible for that. So it is important for everyone to understand what these discussions are about. We need to enable responsibility, even though we have a unified leadership. So FinOps will lead, but everyone is responsible for what they do. And also we talked about leveraging the cloud variable pricing model. So pay-as-you-go model should be seen as an opportunity to increase value, not a risk. So if we understand the cost per transaction, the pay-as-you-go model is great. But if we can't measure the revenue associated with our cloud spend, then that is a risk. We need to stop guessing. We can't guess our cloud spend. Like I said, we need to measure the cost per transaction, what is the revenue coming, so then we'll understand how much we can spend. And we need to prioritize short-term iterative planning. So small changes and continuous improvement. I see a lot of companies that plan a lot of stuff, and sometimes they don't deliver that because they think too big and start too big. So you need to think big, but always start small. So those are the 6 FinOps principles that guide the practices. And we have a few personas, which are profiles in the companies that are important to have these principles delivered and to make these changes in the organization. So is anyone that is participating certified as a FinOps practitioner or has experience in managing FinOps? It would be really good. Please share in chat. So what are the roles, responsibilities, and metrics that we look for these personas? So the FinOps practitioner, he's responsible for connecting all those areas. So he connects business, IT, and finance, and also empowers their decision-making. He gives support to ensure that the FinOps principles are being followed through the organization and also develop those capabilities. He is the one that's going to bring the definition of what the cloud management practices are in that organization. And also he's responsible to bringing transparency through cost consumption as well as forecasting. So how do we measure if the FinOps practitioner is working well? We have some important metrics that we can look at. So we have some KPIs to understand, is the FinOps practitioner doing his job? So one of the metrics is the accuracy of budgets and forecasts. So there was like we said earlier in the presentation, like 69% of the companies spend 25% or more of their budget. So that is an important metric to look at. Coverage of reserved resources. So the cloud providers, they have reserved resources and savings plan, which is basically an agreement for you to have a constant spend, and that brings you an economy. So we look at companies trying to have around 60 to 70% of coverage of reserved resources. We need to have efficient purchasing models, so understand what is the best way to purchase a specific service. And we need to have the tag coverage. That's probably one of the most important metrics when we talk about FinOps, is really having a structured and a big coverage of tags through our organization. And another challenge that we see when we talk about FinOps is that a lot of the responsibility comes to the IT teams, but not always the executives participate on that. So we need to ensure that the responsibilities are assigned and that the teams are respecting their budgets. So IT or the executives are responsible for making those responsibilities clear. They need to guarantee the investments are aligned with business objectives. So for that, they need to bring the business context and the metrics that are important for them. They need to understand if technology is creating a competitive advantage in the market, and they should be monitoring the company's revenue and profit growth related to the technology spend. They should be understanding what is the transaction per infrastructure cost to understand if they're being more or less efficient in their technology spend. POs are also important in this journey. So POs, they need to guarantee that the new products and features are accurate with cost. So POs are responsible for forecasting how much that service is going to spend. They need to accelerate product growth. They need to reduce time to market and deliver new solutions in a cost-efficient manner. And they are accountable for the cost of what is being developed. So whatever is in the development space, PO needs to be really responsible through those costs. Okay? Engineering and operations, they are responsible for the solutions that they are being implemented, and that those solutions should be implemented efficiently in cost. They are accountable of the cost of whatever is being developed. They're accounting that the architectures are cost efficient and they are scalable. They are responsible for continually optimizing. So another problem that we see a lot in the companies is that they deliver that solution really well, but then over time, there's not an optimization process. So that is something that is really important for the engineering teams too. And they have the responsibility through all application and services. Also, they should be guided to identify when resources are not cost efficient and make changes. So it is common in technology that sometimes the usage changes. For example, there are cloud services that they are cheap for storage, but they are expensive per request. So if we have an application that doesn't have that has a lot of storage but not a lot of requests, maybe there's a specific service that we should use. But there are other services that they are really cheap for requests, but they are expensive in storage. And sometimes over time, our application usage changes. Sometimes the users will start to make more requests, and then the service that we planned originally may not be the best service for that application anymore, and we should make changes. So engineering should be looking at those opportunities, and they should measure the ratio between revenue and infrastructure costs, as well as the cost per transaction or per service to make those decisions. And finance, which sometimes thinks the cloud costs are complicated, they should work closely with the FinOps practitioner to understand the consumption history. They're also responsible for the accurate forecast and to plan budget with the FinOps practitioner's help. And they are also responsible for, like I said, the accurate budgets. Another part that is also important in the company is the procurement department. So they need to understand if they're purchasing the best possible solutions. For example, having a consumption compromise with the cloud, like we said, reservations and savings plan, but that can impact speed. I've seen companies that made a compromise that was too big that they couldn't make changes later, or if they optimize something, they have to pay for more anyway. So that's why we say that 70% is a good number. And another good practice is that you don't need to do that one single day a year, right? So if every 3 months you're reviewing your savings plan and making small savings plans, that is something that's a lot easier to change, because every 3 months you'll be able to adapt that. They should manage also the relationship with the cloud providers and negotiate favorable contracts. If you have a big spend, you can really negotiate that with those cloud providers. And they should look at the commitment contracts and also volume discounts. And finally, they should also optimize license costs in the cloud to working with a FinOps practitioner to make those decisions. So at the end of the day, how does a FinOps structure work like? It's, one second, there we go. Okay, here we go. So we have engineering, the business and PO, executives, and finance procurement. They all work together with the FinOps team. Engineering is responsible for the infrastructure changes, whatever cloud provider you're using, and procurement is responsible for the price negotiation with those cloud providers. So this is kind of how the structure of a FinOps practice looks like. And here at eCore, we are really an extension of the FinOps team. So we work together with our customers' FinOps teams to help them guarantee the best practices, bring them trends of what's working and what's not working in the market. And starting to go a little bit about the journey. How does a FinOps journey look like? We like to separate the FinOps journey in 3 phases. So it's basically inform, optimize, and operate. So in the inform phase, the first thing that we need to do to make the decisions is having visibility of consumption, costs, and forecast. After we have some visibility, we start optimizing that and setting some goals of where we want to go. And after we optimize that, we have some quick wins here. We start operating that over time to guarantee that that stays optimized over time. And what is really common here is that after you improved in that cycle, maybe you want some more specific visibility, and then you'll go again to the inform phase to get some more details, and you'll keep optimizing until it makes sense to have really, really specific data. So a little bit of how this journey looks like. So we can separate that kind of in 3 levels. So we're crawling, we're walking, or we're running. When we're crawling, when we have a few tools and we don't have visibility of everything in the organization, we have some basic KPIs. We don't have processes like structured processes to handle the cloud capacity. We don't have a process to handle extreme cases or things that aren't expected. We have like 60% of services acquired through commitment, and here we can put kind of 60% of that 70% goal. We have less than 50% of the resources tagged, and our forecasts have a more than 20% margin of error. When we're walking, we increase a lot of our KPIs, our processes. We can handle better with extreme cases, and we have more resources acquired through reservations. We have more than 80% of the resources tagged, and we have a less than 50% margin of error in our forecasts. And finally, when we're running, we're talking about more than like 80% of that 70% goal acquired through commitment, and we have more than 90% of our resources tagged with less than 12% margin of error in our forecast. So this is kind of some of the KPIs and goals that companies should look at when adopting a FinOps practice. All right, so we talked about why FinOps. We gave a little bit of examples of how FinOps works and what we should be concerned. We brought a little bit of the FinOps definition. So what's the framework? What are the personas? What are the principles? But how do I actually do that in my company that I have to run, that I have a bunch of challenges every day? We have new features to deliver. We have customers. We have a bunch of things that we should do, and we can't just stop and start doing everything by the book. So now we bring some basic recommendations of how we should start and what we should do in this journey. So basically, we have 3 phases. We have the planning phase, we have the preparation phase, we start, and then we execute. So going through the phases, right? In the planning phase, the first thing that we should do in our organization is to identify who are the key stakeholders and who are the people that should be responsible for the FinOps changes in our organization. We create a plan, we gather other supporters for our strategy, and then we recruit other advocates that should help. So we have a customer that we're doing, the one that I mentioned that we delivered a FinOps workshop for more than 80 people. There were 3 people that started as the key stakeholders for the organization. So we had the IT director, we had the infrastructure manager, and they hired a FinOps practitioner. So those were the key stakeholders. We did a FinOps assessment to understand what their scenario looked like, what were the improvements they needed. We brought this presentation, we delivered workshops related to what FinOps means, and now we're gathering other people to support the strategy. So, and when I say supporters, we're talking about people even on other departments. So people in business, people in finance and all that. So we should bring who are the organizational leaders that will provide executive support. We should align the strategy for that stakeholder with the company strategy. And we need to understand what are the basic current challenges that where we could have quick wins. So is there lack of visibility in consumption? Is there lack of business metrics? And we need to understand who are the people that are impacted through that practice. So we can have, after that, that was the FinOps assessment that I shared the link earlier. I'll share it again, but it's in chat, where we can understand related to knowledge, metrics, process, adoption, and automation. What is the company's maturity and how can they develop with that? And then we build a plan. So we'll understand what is the long-term vision of the FinOps strategy. We'll establish a team that is responsible for that FinOps strategy. So that's kind of like the FinOps center of excellence. We'll identify which are the KPIs that we'll start measuring from there. So like we mentioned before, the accuracy of budgets and forecasts, the coverage of reserved and spot resources, and the tag coverage, and of course, business value metrics like sales and all that. And I like to highlight this last one, right? A lot of the people talk about technology metrics, but we really need to talk about business metrics. Otherwise, we don't understand what is the value that the cloud is bringing to us. So, and after we understand where we are and we build this vision, we need to work together with the supporters. So we should bring a kickoff with the current state and the major challenges. So in this workshop we delivered for 80 people from a customer last week, they showed what were the improvements that they had over the 2 months we've been working together. And basically they went from less than 10% of the resources tagged to more than 90% of the resources tagged. And that reduced costs in about 30%. And that was a really, really big economy in just 2 months of work. And then in this kickoff, we also bring where in which moment of the FinOps journey the company's at, what's the initial vision of the roadmap, what are the quick wins, and what is going to be the value proposition of the FinOps culture. Because a lot of people at first glance, they'll think, well, this is a lot of work, this is more restriction. But if we do it well, at the end of the day, they'll have more speed and it will be easier for them to work. It's just an initial change in the process. And then, like we said, we recruit supporters. So we'll bring people from other areas to help. We should have a budget to train these people in FinOps. And we should look at tools. We should hire tools that could help us with the FinOps practice. Like I showed earlier, we do have a dashboard that we, I'd have to change my screen, but I showed earlier a dashboard where we could have business data together. And in FinOps.org, there is a lot of information of what kind of tools the companies are using. So a lot of people do use Cost Explorer, which is not that great of a tool. I mean, it is a basic tool and it gives a lot of information, but you won't be able to connect with business metric. And we can see that over time, more companies are working with homegrown tools where they can connect with business metrics. So this is where we see the companies that have more maturity in FinOps. this is what we recommend also. And another question people have is, what about shared expenses, right? So there are resources, for example, networking, that I can't tag that. How do I measure the cost for that? So we can see that over the year, companies are going more towards a fixed percent for shared resources, because first, a lot of the companies would do it proportionally, but there are some services, for example, they are cheap for storage but really expensive in networking, so a fixed percentage will make a lot of sense. But as you can see, a lot of the companies still don't work at shared resources. Then we should engage the stakeholders. So like I said, there's the FinOps readiness assessment. We could help companies with those assessment, where we'll define what are the specific tags and metadata, like what we should tag and what are the tags for that company. Because one thing that we see a lot is that companies they don't have a structured tag. So sometimes they would use capital letters. For production, they will use production, prod with capital letters or with small letters. So that won't be able to, when we measure that, there won't be a structured data. We need to define those KPIs. We need to define the alert for thresholds. For example, when should an alarm sound? Is it related to budget? Is it related to the cost per request? And we should start building the FinOps dashboards by persona. Like we said, each persona has their KPIs, so they should have information related with those KPIs so they can make decisions. And we should improve in our forecasting model. By the time we have the cost per request, we should be able to forecast better. And also with some information regarding to the state of FinOps, we can see that a lot of companies, like 20%, and just a quick information here, there are like 300 companies that answer this FinOps, the state of FinOps research. And these usually are companies that are more advanced in FinOps practice, because, I mean, they are with the FinOps Foundation answering this information. So this doesn't reflect the total of the market. And for these companies that answer the FinOps the state of FinOps research, more than 20% don't record accuracy. And another 7 or 8% have more than 20% variance. So if we look at the total of the market, I mean, these numbers are really big, and only a small, like 15% part of the companies that are really good with FinOps have a less than 15% accuracy in forecasts. Like we said earlier, tagging is really important, and we always say that we need to have at least 4 basic tags, what's the application, and we need to have like the taxonomy and the definition for that. Which one is the environment? Is it production? Is it Q&A? Or is it quality assurance? Is it development? What is the environment for that? Which is the cost center, and who is the owner for that application? Then we will be able to understand better how the costs are structured through our organization, and we'll be able to engage those stakeholders. So with tags, we'll be able to commit with the objectives. We'll be able to define who are the leaders in the teams for each of the KPIs, and we'll be able to start with some quick wins. So it's really common just with tagging to see that there are a lot of resources that could be shut down, and we can bring a lot of economy for that. And then we should start cadences. So either a weekly meeting connecting everyone so we could discuss the FinOps best practices. In a smaller company, maybe a monthly meeting where everyone can be together. In a really large company, maybe every day we should have a FinOps daily where we connect everyone. And there are some quick wins. Like after we have the tags, there are some quick wins that we could definitely save a lot of money with. Basically, we should understand what is the procurement model for the services. So for example, we should have reserved instances and savings plans related to the commitment of those services. Spot instances are really good also, which they are a lot cheaper. And understanding which are the services that we need to hire them on demand. So understanding this model, that is a really way to save money really fast. We should optimize services to scale, and we should have the commitment contract. So that saves a lot of money too. After we have this plan structured, then we really kick off and start the FinOps strategy. So we need to educate our team, we need to define workflows, we need to define templates, and we need to have playbooks. So what are the workflows that we should have? We should be having anomaly alerts, we should having budget alerts. So what's an anomaly alert? Let's say that an application usually has 100 requests per day or per hour. And in a specific hour, they have 300 requests. That should be alerted. We should understand, was that something that was normal, or was it maybe a mistake someone made in a deploy that is making that go into a loop and requesting too much? So those anomaly alerts really help us to save a lot of money. Budget alerts related to our spend. We should stop with frequency to understand, are there any optimization opportunities here? And we should have a cost governance policy defined. Another important thing is to have a chargeback and showback structure. Like I said, we should develop specific dashboards, and in these dashboards, we should have visibility per department or product. That's a little bit of the dashboard that I showed earlier in the presentation. We should allocate those costs directly to the department or product that owns that budget, and we should give visibility of everyone of how much they're spending, even though there is a centralized budget. So basically, here is kind of a first level of detail, and here we can go to a second level of detail, even though it's the same budget, but we need more details and how that is spent. So that's also why we define what is the cost center and who's the owner of the application, so we can have these two levels. And sadly, when we look at the state of FinOps, a lot of the companies are using manual spreadsheets and instead of having an optimized tool. Some of the companies have a multi-step tool where you can have more details, and very few companies do have an automated IT and finance integration. And a lot of the companies don't separate and don't have budgets per specific team. We should define our measurement templates. So our reserve instances and savings plan calculation, we should be working what are those metrics for that. We should have a structured forecast template, and we should track the KPIs. We need to define the playbooks which will run our costs. So we need to understand, what is our cloud and cost usage going to be like? We should understand how we are going to track performance and also look at benchmarking. So like I said, the FinOps Foundation website, they have a lot of information about benchmarks. So that's like the first place you should go to when you make a decision. So, well, how should I measure this? Or what tools are companies using? Data.finops.org, that will have a lot of information related to that. Enable real-time decision making. So the better the tools, the faster we can make decisions, and we need to optimize consumption. And when we have that structured, so what's next? What can we do after we've planned, after we started this project and we had some quick wins? Like I said, I recommend a few materials related to FinOps. So there's this book that's called Cloud FinOps by O'Reilly. It's a big book. It has a lot of information. It's based on people that run the FinOps Foundation. And like I said, FinOps.org, they have a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of best practices where you can research, and even courses related to FinOps. And like I said earlier, you can count on eCore to be an extension of the FinOps team. So whoever's interested, I can share some more information about FinOps, and we can really work in a FinOps assessment to understand, what is the maturity like in your company? Where are the opportunity for quick wins, and where you can start saving money or even increasing revenue in the cloud related to FinOps. So this was basically a little bit of the overview that we wanted to bring related to FinOps today. So what is the definition of FinOps? Who are the key personas in each organization that should be working with FinOps and what they should be looking at? And how do we start that in a practical way? So how do we plan? How do we do a first assessment? How do we plan the quick wins and involve our FinOps strategy? So if I could wrap this up with some really important information, is first, start tagging your resources. Like you said, there are 4 really important tags. So the application, the environment, the owner, and the cost center. And after that, you will be able to make better decisions. You'll be able to create dashboards. And the other important thing is understand what is the business metric per application. So let me just stop sharing my screen really quick. So understand what is the business metric per application. Like we shared earlier, Amazon, for example, has the conversion rate per request, or the cost per transaction and a cost per request. So understand what is your transaction for that application. And I'm not talking about the entire company. I'm talking about that specific application. What does a transaction mean in the context? Because then you'll be able to understand how you're making money related to your cloud spend. So, I see some people answering, sending some messages in chat. So I'm glad this was useful information. We're coming here to the end of this webinar. So thank you for all of those who participated, and you can count on eCore to help you to develop your FinOps strategy. So see you in our next webinar.